welcome. I'm Andrea Sankey, and we are at the Women Deliver Conference in Copenhagen, Denmark, where thousands of people have gathered to discuss how to improve the welfare of girls and women globally. Now, one topic being debated at the conference is the subtle importance of terminology in empowering and helping women. Now, to most people, the term family planning has a positive connotation, but some say it's counterproductive to progress and it needs to be avoided. Well, in the studio, I have with me three extraordinary women all working with reproductive health. Here immediately to my right, Niradza Gonjvanda, who is you are the General Secretary of the World WCA. In the middle here, Dilys Walker, who is the founding member of Pronto International, and over further down, Shruti Chandrasekaran, who is a Women Deliver Young leader and a research specialist with the DFID. Thanks all so much for joining us. Dilys, I'm going to talk to you first. You feel the term family planning can be sometimes problematic. Why is that?
Well, I think, certainly for any of the listeners who were in the session this morning, I think it was very well articulated by Pam Scott about what some of the problems are with that terminology. And I think people can recognize that adolescents who are beginning their reproductive and exploring their reproductive sexuality really don't need family planning. They need to prevent pregnancy and they need to avoid their first pregnancy. And at the same time, women who've completed their families, on the other side of the sort of age spectrum, they also need to avoid pregnancy and they need to have the sort of access to those sorts of options that family planning isn't really what they're about. So I think, it's a little short-sighted, yet it's also, there is a large segment of the population that need family planning as is.
Okay. Niradza, you think it's a term we should keep?
I think it's a term we should keep because by it being controversial in itself allows us to have the crucial conversations. It allows us to be able to talk about contraception and to say family planning is not just about contraception. Family planning is about making decisions, making choices, having opportunities. It is about sexual and reproductive health and rights. So by its controversy, it opens the crucial conversations on issues which are sensitive. And for some of us who are coming from a faith perspective, I need that controversy in order to say we must be able to discuss about choice. We must be able to talk about contraception. But that is also a term that I know took a long time to negotiate during the ICPD. We also took a long time to negotiate it. But for me, crucially, it's a term that by its controversy allows us to have the discussion. Yes, I totally agree. I work on ending child early and forced marriage, and I totally agree that the issues that young people are facing with adolescent girls are very complex, and we have to delay pregnancy or we have to make sure that they're empowered. But ultimately, they need services, they need opportunities, they need information. They need to form relationships, they need to define what kind of family. And that conversation around the sensitivity of what is a family is in itself important conversation.
Fair enough. But Shruti, you think the term family planning in the context we use it in is actually very misleading.
I agree. I know my colleagues have referred to adolescents and young people, but how many young people actually relate to the term family planning? We have pacemakers. They set the pace of our heart, but we don't call them life givers or long livers or something. We call them pacemakers. How many young people, there are many young people who are not having sex because they want to plan families. So how much of it actually relates to us?
It's interesting, though. I think Dilys can relate to this best, though. In the United States, family planning clinics came as the preferred alternative to what had been called abortion clinics before.
Well, certainly that's what, you think about Planned Parenthood, which is all about marketing as a family planning organization, when often family planning can be sometimes used as a way to describe services also provided as to end pregnancy when that's needed as well. And I think we have to be clear about our terminology. It's unfortunate that how can you imagine a 16, 17-year-old woman beginning to explore her sexuality thinking she needs family planning? We actually don't want that 17-year-old woman to think, I need family planning now. That's not, I don't think anyone think in her best interest. Now, at the same time, that's her future those are her future needs most likely, and how do we kind of cater our language to the needs of the women we're serving? It's all about the same women-centered argument that we're hearing so much about.
I want to jump in on that and say, I come from sub-Saharan Africa, where we have a huge number of adolescents who were born with HIV, who are living with HIV. We have this high level of child marriage. Some countries like Niger, Burkina Faso, we have 78% of girls are married under the age. So we also need to know that young people are having sex. Young people are forced into these relationships. Therefore, they need information and they need services. And therefore, they are also in a context of a family which is even defined for them, which they did not self-define. And when a young person is 16, she's starting to have a relationship, she's dating, she wants to know about kissing. And do I transmit the virus? She wants to know if I have sex, what are the implications? And the service provider should be able to fully provide full information, because we know these young people are also in a very vulnerable situation and they need information to make decisions. So I think we need an honest conversation around the reality, but also at the same time to say it's a sensitive issue. Definitely it is, but we have an obligation to rights, to dignity, and to choice.
Go ahead, Shruti, you had a comment.
I was going to reflect a little bit on your point. Just that if I said abortion is a method of family planning, that sends shivers, when I say it out loud, it sends shivers down my spine, because I've been cultured to think that family planning and abortion are two separate entities, that there are different objectives, they have different end goals, and they're just not supposed to be on the same spectrum. But for me, actually, it should be on the same spectrum. It's all about women's rights and health and well-being. I don't want to sound like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, but post-coitus, pre-coitus, post-conception, preconception, it's all about women's rights and well-being. So why are we debating this? I feel that calling it family planning is alienating it from abortion, and abortion is a women's rights issue as well, and we should be putting our forces together, we should be bringing funding together, we should not be separating out our advocacy efforts if we want to carry out women's health and rights.
I think we're kind of ignoring, I don't want to say the elephant in the room, that sounds too dramatic, but terminology is language. And languages, even the English language used in various countries, have different nuances, different inherent meanings that are completely different from one country to the next. Still though, if you could choose your own terminology for this and either keep family planning on board or erase it, where would you go?
I would still remain on family planning, because I feel it enables us to also talk about sexual and reproductive health and rights. But when we just talk about sexual and reproductive health and rights without talking about the dynamics within a relationship, because family planning is not only about having babies, it's also about deciding not to have babies or deciding not to have a family. It's all part of that decision making. So for me, at the center of the whole conversation around family planning is around personal, empowered decision making for women with full knowledge, with full information, for them to access services, to demand accountability, and to demand justice if they are violated. So and as I said at the beginning, the controversy is where change happens. Change does not happen if we remain in the comfort zone. Change happens if we dare to have crucial conversations on uncomfortable issues, because that's exactly where the violations are happening.
Okay, Phyllis?
Yeah, so it's really interesting hearing my colleagues here speak, and I'm thinking that when we say the term family planning, we're really making an assumption about the women that are seeking that care, that they are planning a family, whether now or in the future. And I think to some extent that's not fair. That's not fair for many women of the world who, in fact, don't want children ever. So, and I think we have to respect that perspective, and I'm thinking, is a more appropriate term something along the lines of pregnancy planning? Planning your pregnancy planning, fertility planning, to call it what it is in a more sort of straightforward. That's what we're talking about, planning pregnancies, not planning families.
Right. Go ahead, Shruti.
Well, I think we should call a spade, and I think this piece of rubber, there's going to be more to planning a family than a piece of rubber. So And I feel that a lot of times what happens is family planning is tend to be associated with women, and sort of in many contexts it's a woman's responsibility. So I feel we leave men out of the conversation if we continue to call it family planning. We already are leaving young people out because we're not able to relate to the term. So I definitely think we need to change the term. I try to think what I would want to call it, like something maybe contraceptive. So contraceptive is sort of limiting because to contracept means to prevent the conception of, and that I feel leaves out abortion. So I don't have an idea yet, but
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is something we've also struggled in general in the area of working in family planning and contraception is that we try to hope that all women are going to prefer, we push the birth control pill, we push the intrauterine device, we push implants, and we think that we've created the holy grail of pregnancy prevention or pregnancy planning, when in fact, women are different, cultures are different, and there's not a sort of one term fits all solution to this. I think we have to accept that.
That's where the problem lies. I think the problem lies in defining family planning as only about contraception. Because for me, family planning is not about the pregnancy, it's about the decision, the personal decision about my body, about my sex, about my relationships, and how I want to go about my life, whether I want to marry or not to marry, whether I want to have a baby or not to have a baby. That is part of the personal decision making. So my definition of family planning is not about a pregnancy. A pregnancy is a consequence of that decision, which has to happen before one. So that whole definition of family planning for me is much more.
We're agreeing. So in fact, maybe there needs to be a different term for this world of pregnancy planning. Like, well, how do you just have some control over that, whether or not there's a pregnancy, versus planning whether or not you want a family and all the different elements that go into it. Are we really talking about two
with the
different
word
things?
family? And when you find women having to confront that term for the growing and growing number of women that don't want to have children, and when you call it family planning, it does build a defensiveness, may be too strong of a word, but it does hit you. That's saying, wait a minute, this is not about a family, this is about me not wanting children, and that's also okay. And let me address this to Dilys first. Do you think there is enough sensitivity toward women who are choosing not to have children, but who still feel this constant pressure, particularly in societies in sub-Saharan Africa, that they have to, or else they're not a proper woman?
Right. No, well, and certainly in cultures other than my own, fertility, well, I think in all cultures, fertility is an enormous part of being a woman and having sort of a full life. But it's also something that you can decide to do or not to do. And I think that it's one of those areas that we haven't fully explored, that active choice. And how many of those women, the bottom line, what we want to do is give women the choice.
Go ahead.
I agree that when a person decides not to have a family, like to have a life partner, whatever partner, whoever that partner is their choice. And that choice has to be respected. And that choice also comes with having to make decisions about what that means and all the pressures that are available. So when we are talking about family planning, it's also, I work with young people, and I work in this very faith feminist organization. And some of the discussions we've had is women will say, you know what, Nyaradza, me, I'm really not intending to marry, but I'm intending to adopt, I'm intending to foster. Mm-hmm. So my fear is that by narrowing the concept of family planning to only pregnancy, we are not fully embracing the total options about how one decides. I go back to the issue of personal decision making and personal fulfillment, that it's not just about having a child, but it's about how you want to live your life, and to be able to communicate and to negotiate that decision with other people close to you. It could be your brothers, your sisters, your friends, and say, this is my decision. So if this is your decision, where do you get the information that you need for the decision that you have made? So it's, for me, more than a service, it's more about the choice and the decision making, and then having the support and the information necessary for one to be able to enjoy their human rights and to enjoy their decision.
Go ahead.
Um, I think maybe we can separate out the actual method and sort of the dialogue around it. So call the method something, and just call everything else under the all of this is under the umbrella of women's rights and health and well-being. But maybe call the device something, call everything else something else. I don't know.
I'm just curious to go back to the context that you work in. Is it surprising you to find more and more women who say they don't want to get married and they're not interested in having children, but instead to foster and adopt, because that's not part of the traditional society that is still very strong in the region?
I increasingly am finding that. I lead an organization in 120 countries, and why the word family becomes important to discuss is we start to define that there is no single definition. This heterosexuality definition, heteronormativity, is seen to be the norm, but that's not a single norm. There are different forms of family, and within those different forms of living and being, the sense of being and defining how you want to live in your being needs to be respected. Because that's, if you decide to be single and not going to any relationship, you are your family, and that has to be respected, that needs to be protected. It means somebody might still be having a relationship somewhere, but they don't want to have children. They still need to know what are the consequences if I have unprotected sex, for instance, because it's important that we separate. We are very clear on that the notion of the family is also a controversial conversation, because it comes back to the world assuming that a family is a man and woman only family, married and with a marriage certificate and paid lobola like in my country. But we have all ranges of family, and those needs to be respected, and the consequences and the implications for women's decision making within that and their bodily integrity needs to be respected. I think this is why I'm saying the controversy of the word family planning enables us working in the communities to negotiate the definition of the family, to negotiate what planning means, because you can't just plan without having the information.
Right.
So it opens the opportunities for us to discuss the multiple dimensions.
If I may jump in just to chime in, I think as a young person, accessing family planning is difficult by itself. It's quite complicated. And I have friends, I know young women who need to access family planning methods, not for the point of planning a family, but to regulate their menstrual cycles. I feel that you're already facing stigma by going up to the pharmacy and either needing a prescription or asking for family planning methods, but you're facing another layer of complexity because you don't, like I said, you can't relate to the term. You need it for something else.
No, and I think I would like to reiterate what you say, sort of as an obstetrician gynecologist, I often prescribe family planning methods for medical conditions. So they in fact are sort of medical solutions to, as you say, irregular bleeding, problems of women that have other medical complications in which different contraceptive methods may actually help them. And it has nothing to do with either controlling their fertility, it has something to do with improving their own health. So I think that that's also a really important issue around using family planning for these devices and medications that have a whole panorama of possible uses,
Right.
in fact.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think it's this range that in the whole concept of family planning, we have the issues of the values, the social norms that are defined in a way at times that undermines the essence of progressing women's rights. And then we have the information which at times is not provided in a friendly, empowering way, or which is totally unavailable to young people. That's why in the YWCA we have the safe spaces. And then we have the services and the commodities. So I think that the word family planning has had sensitivity by just reducing it to the commodities and the services, and at the same time without an honesty to to negotiate, not to negotiate, to insist on the rights of women when it comes to the values. We have been in all these negotiations in the United Nations, and when it comes to the values, the issues of sexual and reproductive health and rights, me feeling good about my body, making choices about who I want to be, whom I want to relate to, that's where the controversies lie. The controversies lie in the norms, the inadequacy of information, and at times the lack of choices on the services. I live in countries in Africa where at times even those commodities, the contraception options are not available. A woman is just told this is what is here.
So
take
family
it or
planning
not.
means this and
Yes.
nothing else. Like
So
this.
that I think is
Right.
is where we need to unpack the conversation.
Okay, Nyadzara, unfortunately we're out of time. I'm going to let you have the last word, and I'd like to thank all three of our panelists so much for joining us. And thanks to our viewers as well for joining us here at Women Deliver 2016. Please stay tuned for more great programs, and remember you can tweet your comments and questions using our hashtag WDLive, and find us throughout the day right here on this channel. Bye-bye.